The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Command training facility in Coronado, California. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his tactical vest and checked his watch. Today was supposed to be routine, another day of advanced marksmanship training for his SEAL team. What he didn't expect was the phone call from the base commander's office at 800 hours. "Rodriguez, we're having a visitor today," came the gruff voice of Commander Peterson through the secure line. "Civilian contractor, something about evaluating our training protocols. Keep an eye on her, show her around, but don't let it interfere with the schedule." Marcus frowned. Civilian oversight wasn't uncommon, but it usually came with weeks of advance notice and mountains of paperwork. "Her, sir? Dr. Sarah Chen, some kind of consultant. She'll be there by Aero 9:30. Make sure she stays in the designated areas." As Marcus hung up, he turned to his team of 12 elite operators who were already preparing their gear for the day's training session. These men had been through hell and back together: Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia. They were the best of the best, and their current focus was maintaining their edge through rigorous training exercises. "Listen up," Marcus called out. "We've got a babysitting assignment today. Some contractor is coming to observe our training. Petty Officer Williams, you're with me on escort duty." Jake Williams, a lean sniper with over 8 years of special operations experience, looked up from cleaning his rifle. "Great. Another suit trying to understand what we do from behind a clipboard." The team had dealt with plenty of observers over the years: Pentagon officials, foreign military liaisons, defense contractors, and academic researchers. Most came with preconceived notions about special operations, took their notes, and left without really understanding the complexity of what these operators did daily. At precisely Aero 9:30, a black sedan pulled up to the main gate. Marcus and Williams watched from the administration building as a woman in her early 30s stepped out. Dr. Sarah Chen was not what they expected. Instead of the typical business attire most consultants wore, she was dressed in practical cargo pants, hiking boots, and a simple navy blue polo shirt. Her black hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and she carried only a small backpack and a tablet. Marcus approached as she finished checking in with security. "Dr. Chen, I'm Chief Rodriguez. I'll be showing you around today." Sarah shook his hand with a firm grip. "Thank you, Chief. I appreciate you taking the time. I know having observers can be disruptive to your routine." There was something different about her demeanor. Unlike most civilians who visited the facility, she didn't seem intimidated by the surroundings or overly impressed by the mystique of the SEALs. She was observant but relaxed, professional but not stiff. As they walked through the facility, Marcus pointed out various training areas: the obstacle courses, the diving tanks, the tactical training houses. Sarah asked thoughtful questions about training methodologies and safety protocols, but her inquiries were specific and technical, suggesting she had more than a passing familiarity with military operations. "What's your background, if you don't mind me asking?" Williams inquired as they passed the physical training area where several SEALs were running drills. "I do operational analysis for various government agencies," Sarah replied diplomatically. "I study how elite units train and maintain their effectiveness." It was a carefully neutral answer that revealed nothing while sounding completely reasonable. Marcus made a mental note of her evasiveness, but decided not to push. Contractors often worked on classified projects and were bound by their own security protocols. The team had moved to the shooting range by 1100 hours. This was where they spent most of their training time, honing the marksmanship skills that could mean the difference between mission success and failure. The facility boasted one of the most advanced ranges on the West Coast, with targets that could be programmed for various scenarios and distances up to 1,000 meters. As the SEALs began their exercises, Sarah positioned herself in the observation area, taking notes on her tablet. She watched intently as each operator went through their paces. pistol drills at close range, rifle work at intermediate distances, and precision shooting at extended ranges. "That's Petty Officer Thompson," Marcus explained, pointing to a stocky operator who was consistently hitting center mass on targets at 600 meters. "He holds our facility record for long-range accuracy, set it about 10 years ago during qualification trials." Sarah nodded, watching Thompson's technique. "What was the record?" 10 consecutive hits at 800 meters, center mass, with iron sights," Williams answered with obvious pride. "It's been unmatched since 2014. We've had guys come close, but nobody's been able to replicate it." The record had become something of a legend at the facility. Thompson had set it during a particularly challenging qualification course, and despite years of attempts by some of the military's best marksmen, it remained untouchable. The shooting conditions that day had been perfect. No wind, ideal temperature, excellent visibility, but even accounting for those factors, it was an extraordinary achievement. As the morning progressed, Sarah continued her observations. She watched how the team communicated during exercises, how they managed stress under simulated combat conditions, and how they adapted their techniques based on different scenarios. Her questions became more sophisticated, touching on topics like muscle memory development, stress inoculation training, and the psychological aspects of marksmanship under pressure. "You seem to know quite a bit about this," Marcus observed during a brief break. Sarah smiled, but didn't elaborate. "I've studied a lot of training programs over the years." By noon, the team was ready for their advanced exercises, the kind of challenging drills that separated elite operators from conventional forces. These included moving target engagements, multiple target scenarios, and precision shooting under physical stress. Sarah continued to observe, but Marcus noticed she was paying particular attention to the equipment and range setup. "Would it be possible to see the actual record target?" she asked Thompson as he finished a series of shots. Thompson, always happy to discuss his achievement, led her to a display case near the range office. The target, preserved behind glass, showed 10 precisely grouped bullet holes, each within the innermost ring at 800 meters. It was an impressive sight even to seasoned professionals. "Iron sights only?" Sarah confirmed, studying the grouping pattern. "That's right. No optics, no wind flags, no spotter assistance. Just me, the rifle, and the target," Thompson said with justified pride. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, then asked an unexpected question. "What rifle did you use?" "Standard M4A1 with a 20-inch barrel. Same weapon system we all train with." As the afternoon wore on, the team moved through various exercises. Sarah's presence became less noticeable as the operators focused on their training. She seemed content to observe from the sidelines, taking occasional notes but generally staying out of the way. Around 1500 hours, as the formal training session was winding down, Sarah approached Marcus with an unexpected request. "Chief, would it be possible for me to try a few shots? I'd like to better understand the equipment and conditions your people train under." Marcus exchanged glances with Williams. It wasn't an unusual request. Many visitors wanted to experience what the SEALs dealt with, but most were satisfied with trying a few rounds at close targets. "Sure, we can set you up at the 100-meter range," Marcus offered. Sarah shook her head slightly. "Actually, I was hoping to try the 800-meter challenge, where the record was set." The range fell quiet. Several SEALs who had been preparing to leave stopped what they were doing. Thompson looked up from where he was cleaning his rifle, a mixture of amusement and skepticism on his face. "Ma'am, that's a pretty advanced exercise," Williams said diplomatically. "Maybe we should start with something more manageable." But Sarah was already walking toward the rifle rack, her movements confident and purposeful. For the first time since arriving, she seemed less like an observer and more like someone who belonged on the range. Marcus found himself curious about what would happen next. In his 15 years of special operations, He had learned that people often surprised you. But he had also learned that there was usually more to someone than met the eye. As he watched Sarah examine the available rifles with the practiced eye of someone who clearly knew weapons, he began to wonder exactly who Dr. Sarah Chen really was and why she was really here. Sarah selected the same model rifle Thompson had used for his record, an M4A1 with the 20-inch barrel. She handled the weapon with a familiarity that immediately caught Marcus's attention. Her grip was correct, her stance natural, and her movements economical. This wasn't someone who had learned to shoot from YouTube videos. "You sure about this, ma'am?" Thompson asked, though his tone had shifted from amusement to genuine curiosity. "That target's barely visible without optics." Word had spread quickly through the facility that a civilian contractor wanted to attempt the legendary shot. A small crowd had gathered, not just the immediate training team, but other personnel who had heard about the unusual request. In a community where marksmanship was both profession and passion, such moments drew attention. Sarah tested the rifle's weight and balance, cycling the action to get a feel for the trigger pull. "I understand the conditions," she said simply. "Iron sights only, 10 consecutive shots, center mass at 800 meters. Marcus found himself studying her more carefully. The way she examined the weapon suggested extensive experience with firearms. Her check of the sight alignment was methodical and professional. When she requested ear protection, she didn't fumble with the equipment like most civilian visitors did. "Range conditions are good," announced Staff Sergeant Riley, who was serving as range safety officer. "Wind is minimal, maybe 2 miles per hour from the southeast. Temperature is 72 degrees. Visibility is excellent." The conditions were indeed ideal, similar to the day Thompson had set his record a decade earlier. Sarah nodded and asked for the standard ammunition load, M855, 5.56 6-meter NATO rounds, the same specification Thompson had used. As she prepared for the attempt, Marcus noticed several things that suggested this woman was not what she appeared to be. Her breathing was controlled and steady. She took her time checking the rifle's zero at closer distances first, firing a few rounds at 200 and 400 meters to understand how the weapon performed. Her groups at both distances were impressive, tight clusters that would have been respectable from any of his team members. "Okay," she said after completing her test shots. "I'm ready for the 800-meter target." The crowd had grown to nearly 30 people, including some who had driven over from other parts of the base after hearing about the attempt. In the special operations community, news traveled fast, especially when it involved someone challenging a long-standing record. Thompson himself had moved to a position where he could observe through a spotting scope. Despite his initial skepticism, he found himself genuinely curious about what would happen. Over the years, he had watched dozens of highly qualified marksmen attempt to match his achievement. Some came close, managing 7 or 8 consecutive hits, but none had been able to maintain the precision required for all 10 shots. Sarah took her position at the firing line. The 800-meter target appeared as a small dark square against the hillside backdrop. Without magnification, hitting it consistently required not just skill, but an almost intuitive understanding of ballistics, breathing, and trigger control. She assumed a prone position, adjusting her body alignment and settling the rifle into her shoulder. Her breathing slowed to a measured rhythm. The range fell silent except for the occasional rustle of wind through the coastal grass. "Range is hot," Riley announced. "Shooter, you may commence firing when ready." Sarah's first shot broke the silence with the sharp crack of the 5.56mm round. Through the spotting scope, Thompson could see the impact clearly, center mass, just slightly left of the bullseye. "Hit, center mass," called the range observer. A murmur went through the crowd. One shot meant little. Even amateur shooters occasionally got lucky at distance. But her form had been textbook perfect, and the shot placement suggested this wasn't luck. The second shot followed 12 seconds later. The bullet struck within inches of the first impact point. Hit, center mass. Marcus found himself leaning forward, watching Sarah's technique with growing interest. Her shooting position hadn't changed between shots. There was no fidgeting, no adjustments, just the steady rhythm of breathing, aiming, and firing. Shot 3. Another center mass hit. Shot 4. Dead center. By the 5th shot, the crowd had grown quiet. What they were witnessing was exceptional shooting by any standard. The grouping was tighter than most of the team members could manage at 300 meters, let alone 800. Shot 6 struck just millimeters from shot 4. "This is unreal," Williams whispered to Marcus. "Who is this woman?" Sarah seemed oblivious to the attention. Her focus was complete, her breathing controlled. Each shot followed the same deliberate process: sight alignment, breath control, smooth trigger squeeze, follow through. Shot 7, center mass. Shot 8. Another perfect hit. Thompson found himself holding his breath as Sarah prepared for the 9th shot. His own record attempt had become more difficult as the pressure mounted with each successive hit. The knowledge that you're 1 or 2 shots away from achieving something extraordinary can affect even the most experienced marksman. But Sarah showed no signs of pressure. Her breathing remained steady, her position unchanged. The 9th shot broke clean, and the bullet found its mark precisely where she had intended. Hit, center mass, 9 of 9. The range was now completely silent. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something special. A civilian contractor, someone most of them had never heard of until that morning, was 1 shot away from matching a record that had stood for 10 years. Sarah ejected the spent cartridge and loaded her 10th round. She settled back into her shooting position, her movements as deliberate and controlled as they had been for the first shot. There was no hesitation, no visible change in her demeanor that would indicate she felt the weight of the moment. Marcus watched through his binoculars as she completed her final sight picture. The rifle steadied. Her breathing slowed to the familiar rhythm, and then the final shot broke with the same crisp crack as the previous 9. Through the spotting scope, Thompson watched the bullet impact. For a moment, he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. The 10th shot had not only hit center mass, it had struck the exact center of the target, creating a group that was noticeably tighter than his own record-setting performance from 2014. "Hit, center mass," the range observer announced, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. 10 of 10, all center mass hits. The silence stretched for several seconds before someone started clapping. The applause grew as the reality of what had just happened sank in. Not only had this unknown visitor matched Thompson's decade-old record, but she had exceeded it in terms of precision and consistency. Sarah safed her weapon and stood up, her expression calm and professional. She didn't celebrate or even seem particularly surprised by what she had accomplished. Instead, she turned to Thompson, who was walking toward her with a mixture of amazement and respect on his face. "That was outstanding shooting," Thompson said, extending his hand. "I've been watching people try to match that record for 10 years. Nobody's even come close until today." Sarah shook his hand with the same firm grip she had used when meeting Marcus that morning. "Thank you. You set a high standard." Marcus approached with the digital target display that showed both shooting performances side by side. Sarah's grouping was visibly tighter. All 10 shots clustered within a circle that could be covered by a silver dollar at 800 meters. It was the kind of shooting that typically required not just exceptional skill, but years of dedicated practice and competition experience. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his tone now carrying a different level of respect, "I think we need to have a more detailed conversation about your background." The crowd was still buzzing with excitement over what they had witnessed. Several team members were examining the rifle Sarah had used, as if trying to understand how the same weapon that they struggled with at distance had been made to perform so precisely in her hands. "Dr. Chen," Williams said, approaching with obvious curiosity, That was some serious shooting. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Sarah handed the rifle back to the armorer and removed her ear protection. For the first time since arriving at the facility, she seemed to consider her words carefully before responding. "I've had some training," she said simply. It was another diplomatic non-answer, but given what they had just witnessed, everyone present understood that some training was a significant understatement. The level of marksmanship she had demonstrated was consistent with someone who had trained at the highest levels of military or law enforcement special operations. Marcus found himself reevaluating everything about their visitor: her careful questions throughout the day, her familiarity with weapons and tactics, her relaxed demeanor in a military environment. It all suggested a background far more complex than a simple civilian contractor. "Chief Rodriguez," Sarah said, "perhaps we could discuss the evaluation privately?" "I think there are some things I should explain." As they walked toward the range office, Marcus couldn't help but smile. In 15 years of special operations, he thought he had seen everything, but this quiet morning in Coronado had reminded him that assumptions could be dangerous, and that sometimes the most impressive people were the ones who didn't need to advertise their capabilities. The legendary range record that had stood for a decade was now history, broken by someone who had introduced herself as just another contractor with a clipboard. In the privacy of the range office, Sarah Chen finally allowed her carefully maintained cover to drop. She reached into her backpack and produced a leather credential case that Marcus recognized immediately. The gold badge and identification card inside belonged to the Central Intelligence Agency. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, Operations Officer, Special Activities Center," she said, her voice taking on a different quality, still professional, but now with the confidence of someone who no longer needed to hide who she was. "I'm here conducting an assessment of SEAL training methodologies for a joint operation we're planning." Marcus studied the credentials carefully. The Special Activities Center was the CIA's elite paramilitary arm, responsible for covert operations in hostile territories around the world. Their operatives were recruited from the highest levels of military special operations, and their training was legendary even within the classified community. "That explains the shooting," Marcus said, settling back in his chair. "But why the cover story? Why not just identify yourself from the beginning?" Sarah smiled for the first time that day, an expression that transformed her face and made her appear younger. "Because authentic assessments require authentic conditions. If you had known who I was from the start, you would have treated me differently. Your team would have performed differently. I needed to see how you actually operate, not how you think you should operate for a CIA evaluation." It made sense. Marcus had conducted enough inspections and evaluations to know that people changed their behavior when they knew they were being watched by higher authorities. By maintaining her cover as a civilian contractor, Sarah had been able to observe the team's genuine training methods and attitudes. "The marksmanship demonstration wasn't planned," she continued, "but when I saw the opportunity to test myself against your facility record, I couldn't resist. It's been a while since I've had access to a range this well-equipped." Marcus found himself curious about her background. SAC operatives were notoriously secretive about their training and experience, but the shooting performance he had just witnessed suggested capabilities that went well beyond standard CIA training. "Military background?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Army Special Operations Command, then Delta Force for 6 years. I was part of the Operational Detachment Delta Sniper program before the agency recruited me." That explained everything. Delta Force snipers were considered among the best marksmen in the world, trained to engage targets at extreme distances under the most challenging conditions. Their selection process was so rigorous that fewer than 5% of applicants successfully completed the training. "The 800-meter shot you just witnessed was actually modest by my previous standards," Sarah admitted. During my time with Delta, our regular training included engagements out to 1,200 meters with similar accuracy requirements. Marcus whistled softly. The SEAL teams prided themselves on their marksmanship skills, but even they acknowledged that Delta Force snipers operated at a different level entirely. "So what's this joint operation you mentioned?" Marcus asked. Sarah's expression became more serious. "I can't discuss specifics, but it involves a high-value target extraction in a denied area. The mission profile requires maritime insertion, which is why we're looking at SEAL capabilities. My assessment today was focused on whether your unit could provide the precision shooting support we need." The pieces were beginning to fall into place. Joint operations between the SEALs and CIA's Special Activities Center were not uncommon, particularly for missions that required both naval special warfare capabilities and the agency's specialized skills in covert operations. "Based on what I observed today," Sarah continued, "your team has excellent foundational skills. The training methodologies are sound, and the level of professionalism is exactly what we need for this type of operation." Marcus felt a sense of pride at the assessment, but also curiosity about what came next. Joint operations with the CIA's elite units were career-defining assignments for SEAL operators. "Will there be follow-up training?" he asked. "That depends on whether your command structure is interested in participating," Sarah replied. "I'll be submitting my report to both the agency and Naval Special Warfare Command. If both sides agree to move forward, we'll begin integration training within the next 6 months." A knock on the office door interrupted their conversation. Williams entered, followed by Thompson and several other team members. "Chief, sorry to interrupt," Williams said, "but the guys wanted to congratulate Dr. Chen on the shooting. Word's already spread to the other teams and everyone wants to know who she is." Sarah looked at Marcus questioningly. He nodded, indicating that he was comfortable with her revealing her identity to the team. "Gentlemen," Sarah said, standing up, "I owe you an explanation. I'm Operations Officer Sarah Chen, CIA Special Activities Center. I was here today conducting an assessment of your training program for a potential joint operation." The reaction was immediate and positive. SEALs respected competence above all else, and Sarah had demonstrated hers in the most direct way possible. Thompson stepped forward with obvious enthusiasm. "Ma'am, that was the finest shooting I've ever witnessed," he said. "I've been trying to get someone to beat that record for 10 years, and you didn't just beat it. You demolished it." "Thank you, Petty Officer Thompson. Your record stood for a decade because it represented exceptional marksmanship. I just had the advantage of different training and more recent practice." Williams was examining a printout of the target results. "Ma'am, this grouping is unreal. All 10 shots could be covered by a quarter. I've never seen anything like it." Sarah's achievements that day would become legendary at the Coronado facility. The story would be told and retold, gaining details with each telling, but the core facts remained extraordinary enough that embellishment was unnecessary. Over the following weeks, the official reports made their way through both CIA and Navy channels. Sarah's assessment of the SEAL team was overwhelmingly positive, noting their professionalism, adaptability, and advanced skill levels. Her recommendation for joint operation approval was unqualified. The SEALs, for their part, gained new respect for CIA capabilities. Many had worked with agency personnel in various capacities, but few had encountered operatives with Sarah's level of tactical skills. The demonstration served as a reminder that elite capabilities existed throughout the special operations community, often in unexpected places. 3 months later, Marcus received orders for a classified training exercise with CIA Special Activities Center personnel. The operation details were need to know, but he recognized Sarah's influence in the selection of his team for the assignment. The joint training took place at a classified facility in Nevada, where SEAL maritime capabilities were integrated with CIA covert operation techniques. Sarah served as one of the primary instructors, and her expertise proved invaluable in preparing the combined teams for their eventual deployment. During one evening briefing, Thompson approached Sarah with a question that had been bothering him since that day at Coronado. "Ma'am, I've been wondering, when you took that shot at our range, were you nervous at all? I mean, you were attempting to break a 10-year-old record in front of a bunch of SEALs who probably thought you were just another civilian?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "Honestly, no. The shot itself was well within my capabilities, and I've performed under much more stressful conditions. What made it interesting was the opportunity to demonstrate that capabilities can exist in unexpected packages." "Is that why you didn't tell us who you were from the beginning?" "Partly," Sarah admitted, "but also because some of the best learning happens when people's assumptions are challenged. Your team learned something that day about making judgments based on appearance. I learned something about your unit's character by watching how you responded to being surprised." The joint operation that emerged from Sarah's assessment would eventually be recognized as one of the most successful CIA-Navy collaborations of the decade. The combination of SEAL maritime capabilities and Special Activities Center operational expertise proved ideal for the mission requirements. But for those who were present at the Coronado Range that November morning, the technical success of the later mission was secondary to the personal lesson they had learned. Sarah Chen had reminded them that in the world of special operations, assumptions could be not just wrong, but dangerous. The range record she set that day would stand for years to come, not because others couldn't match her technical skills, but because the story behind it had become part of the facility's culture. It served as a constant reminder that excellence could appear from unexpected sources, and that true professionals earned respect through performance, not titles. Marcus would later say that Sarah's visit had changed how his team approached their interactions with support personnel, contractors, and other professionals they encountered during operations. The quiet woman with the clipboard had taught them to look beyond surface appearances and to recognize that in the special operations community, the most impressive people were often the ones who had nothing to prove. Years later, when new personnel arrived at the Coronado facility, they would inevitably hear the story of the CIA officer who had introduced herself as a civilian contractor and then proceeded to shatter the facility's most prestigious marksmanship record. The story would serve as both inspiration and warning. Inspiration to pursue excellence regardless of recognition, and warning against the dangers of underestimating others based on first impressions. For Sarah Chen, the day represented something different. It was a reminder of why she had chosen the demanding path of special operations in the first place, not for recognition or glory, but for the satisfaction of being part of a community where performance mattered more than politics, where respect was earned through competence, and where the mission always came first. The small leather credential case she carried would open many doors throughout her career. But that afternoon in Coronado, it had been 10 precisely placed shots that had opened the minds of some of the military's finest operators.